it is a good morning. It is a beautiful morning. Just gotta get the morning tea into me and get myself started. Humans did not evolve for the 9-to-5 shift. Our primitive ancestors worked very, very little, and far from Thomas Hobbes's version of life before the rise of industry being nasty, brutish, and short, life was actually pretty good. Now, admittedly, there was high infant mortality, which brought the overall lifespans down. But if you survived long enough to become 10 years old, you had a pretty good chance of reaching 60 or 70. And that was the reality. Yeah. And our ancestors didn't work as much as we do. They weren't exhausted. They weren't suffering from hypertension. They weren't sick and scared and living in constant fear of losing their job and losing their home and being part of that marginalized and highly criminalized group, the homeless. Yeah. So what changed? Well, unrestricted capitalism and Calvinist Christianity, with the promise that wealth equals virtue, and that if you just work harder, you'll be rich too. And these two lies, these two foundational lies of modern Western, quote, civilization, unquote, have been making us sick ever since. They have been destroying us. They have been ruining our family lives, our home lives, our sex lives, everything. And also that we can feed a vanishingly small class of the obscenely rich, who we are told are inherently morally superior to the rest of us, and we should get down on our knees and adoringly worship them. Because this too is part of the capitalist religion, that the rich themselves are the only gods we need. They are our gods, and we cater to them in every possible way. But do we really need them? The answer is no. We're better off without them. But unfortunately, we have been indoctrinated. We have been brainwashed into believing that we must serve the billionaire class. And as a result, we have an unhealthy society, a sick society. Do we really need to live in a sick society? Now, admittedly, we cannot go back to our hunter-gatherer origins, nor can we go back to lives as medieval peasants, whose lives were also quite leisurely compared to our own. We can't go back to that. But we can elect governments that do not adhere to the false dichotomy of liberal versus conservative. We can elect governments that represent the people, that is the proletariat, that is you and me, rather than electing governments by and for the billionaire class. And we can stop living in fear of each other. Because this is what we're trained to do. We're trained to be afraid of each other, to be afraid of our neighbors. Your neighbor is not your enemy. Your neighbor is not a threat to you. Your neighbor isn't going to hurt you. So stop being afraid of your neighbor. And start being afraid of the billionaires who are telling you to be afraid of your neighbor. They are the problem, not your neighbor. It's not Joe down the hallway. It's not Abdullah down the street. It's not Wai Shang at the convenience store. It's the billionaire who is your enemy. It's not women, feminists. It's not the gays. It's not drag queens or trans people. It's the billionaires. It's the billionaire class that is the threat that endangers us all. Recognize this, and you've made the great leap in understanding to recognize who your enemy really is. And from there, you can begin to build. You need to recognize that the enemy isn't the people you've been told to fear. Your enemy is the one telling you to be afraid. What do you think? Done living in fear yet? The billionaire class does not have your best interests at